All right, gentlemen, so it is Friday night, about 2:38. Well, so I guess Saturday morning, 2:30 a.m. Couldn't sleep. Realized I have not given you guys an update in quite some time. So I found some old footage while I was laying in bed and posted it about the fuel system, but there's been quite a bit of progress since the last time we talked, and I kind of want to go through it and show you what we have done since then. So here we go. So this is the car as it sits now. Front end is off of it. I've got to do quite a bit of wiring, so I figured it was easier to pull the front bumper and the fenders off of it because of the wiring that's got to go through the car. So not just like engine wiring, but all of my headlights, turn signals, all that has been pulled through this hole. I think that it's going to be, I like to have it full tuck. So these wires are going to run along here, potentially like through this hole or over here, and then back to the back side of the headlight. So I actually have to lengthen turn signal wire, headlight wire on both sides. And well, you see it here. All this has got to be lengthened out. So that's all going to change. The car is it's in better shape than the last time you saw it. I did rearrange my garage. I actually moved the DSM to the corner and stacked a bunch of stuff around the outside of it just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And this is my garage with all this junk. So outside of that, that's where that car stays for the time being until we get this one running. What we've done is I did recoat the intake. It looks okay, not too shabby for what it is. It's just like regular old VHT wrinkle coat, black. And it came out halfway decent considering the first time I did it, it looked like absolute garbage. So I'm pretty impressed with this. We did do the fuel system, as I mentioned in the last video, which I posted earlier tonight from like a month ago. But it does have a radium hanger in it. It has a Wabro, I think they call it a Hellcat. I don't know what the actual name for it is. God dang, but this is all in the way. But well, anyways. So, fuel system and hangers in there underneath the seat. I do need to do the fuel pump rewire, which is basically just running heavier gauge wires and a relay to the fuel pump to where it actually gets the amount of amps that it needs whenever you kick the fuel pump on, because it is a bigger pump. It pulls more amps and it needs pretty much like a direct wire from the battery to the relay, and then obviously from the relay to the fuel pump. So you're just using the fuel pump wire as a trigger to key the relay on and use a much heavier gauge wire to run the fuel pump. So that's all installed except for the wiring kit. So I need to do that. And then let's see what else. Since the last time you saw it, obviously intake's on. This is a Hybrid Racing 75mm throttle body. Block out plate for the map because I have one in the RBC intake. And then it does not have any idle air controller, which I'm still debating on it. I do have the plug for it on the harness. I'm not really sure if I'm going to need it, but it would be nice to have just for tunability and make this thing idle in any kind of condition. I do need to port the RBC intake to match this. It is still factory, so I got to get in there, take this intake back off, port that. Once I get it ported, it will go in for good. I do have a throttle cable off of CRX, which is the proper one for this application. It's short enough through here to the firewall. Fuel system's run. This is my return line. Actually, I need to secure it, but how I ran this, and I talked about it in a previous video, but I want to show you what the end product was. So my feed comes up on the driver's side. It actually tucks behind this engine mount, goes over here, and then I do have my filter, and then my feed line that comes up by the I guess the shock tower, and it feeds off the passenger side into the rail. So feed is -8, return is -6, and then regulator on the far side. These are factory TSX injectors, which I actually had to go in and unpin this harness from the original connectors that were on this, because they're different than what the TSX connectors are. These are like junkyard connectors. I repinned them. Best part was the spades are the same, the connector changes, so you just unpin it, plug these connectors back into this harness or this connector here, and it's fine. And when I go to a bigger injector, bigger injectors have a different clip, but they still have the same wires and the same spades, so it's no big deal. You just unpin it, pull them out, put them in a different connector, and plug them back in. So not that big a deal. Radiator is semi-mounted. I still need to flatten these mounts out because they're too tall, so I'm gonna flatten them out, right? So it'll give me a little more distance this way. It'll be a little bit lower, but it should be able to hit that. And then nut search these into the core support on both sides. Full size EB3 radiator. What I'm fighting right now is, this is the throttle position sensor, and you can tell that my upper radiator hose mount is pretty close to this. So it's about 1.5 inches, 2 inches away, probably about 1.5 inches away. But I think I'll be able to get away with a pretty sharp elbow that sinks down and goes to the radiator connector on the block. But Alex once again was probably right. He's got a radiator hose. I don't even know what it's off of. It's like something crazy. He sent me the link. I saved the link because if I ask him for it twice, it's gonna be a big deal. But he sent me the link for it. I will, more than likely, if this works, I'll update it on another video and tell you what exact radiator hose I'm using for this. A lot of the guys that do K24 swaps and these EGs, they only use the half-size radiator, which is, you know, obviously the smaller side. They use this half of it, and the upper radiator hose comes out over here, and then they mount the lower and over here. So this being, I guess, plans for this car were to actually have a driver be able to do some track days. I wanted a full-size radiator. The EP3 radiator actually fits really well in this car. I had to modify the lower radiator bracket or get an aftermarket kit to actually mount it in the car, but I'm actually pretty impressed with the fit. Like, it does fit well. It isn't too tall. It looks crooked. Oh, it's not crooked. It looked a little crooked, but it's not. I can tell you it's square. But I did want a full-size radiator. The reason why I went with the EP3 aftermarket radiator is because this radiator lid is off to the side. It's a lot lower. It clears the hood. A lot of these you'll see have the radiator cap up here, and it doesn't really clear the hood. The other option was an RSX radiator, but it is actually too tall, and you have to mount it way lower in the car, which I didn't really want to do. I didn't want to cut the lower core support out of the car just to mount the radiator lower. So this fits really, really well so far. The only downside is that this comes out right where your TPS is. So once I figure this hurdle out, it shouldn't be a big deal. At that point, the intake pipe is going to go out and down, so this should snake right underneath the throttle body and the intake pipe, and it should be halfway decent. It should work. So that is where we're at. I did, for the most part, like, no lie, for the most part, everything on the backside of the engine, header's installed. I do need to add the second half of it, which is like from here where the 4 pipes collect. I guess the 4 and the 2 and 1. I need to add that to it, which looks like it can be a pain in the butt. But for the most part, it is in, and I wanted to see where everything fell when I did the wiring in the car. So everything from this point forward, ground straps in, the crank sensors in, all of this is wired up the way it's going to be. The harness is in the car from this point back. It was fairly clean. I did put a bulkhead where I guess the factory heater hoses go through. So I bought this, put it in. I like how it is. It looks fairly clean. It's not too bad, but it is nice to the fact that it has like a nice rubber grommet around the outside of it, so I don't have to worry about my wires rubbing on the firewall or anything like that. So that's there. It's far enough away from the header, I don't have to worry about it. And then up until this point, this is all installed, right? So everything else that I need to do is underneath the intake plenum. Once I port this plenum, I can finally mate it to the head with the coolant line and then start running the wires underneath here for everything else. Alternator, injectors, shit, man, everything goes underneath there. All of your map, your TPS, your fan switch, your coolant lines, all starter wires, all that stuff is underneath here. So I need to tidy up, make it look halfway decent. So that is the next step. I hope to port this tomorrow or Sunday. That way I can mount it permanently and just be done with it and start focusing on radiator and lines and fans and wiring harness and stuff like that. So inside of the car, oh, this is horrible. Hang on, let me get my light. I've plugged this before, but this light is awesome for a cheap Amazon special. That's a light. All right, hang on. Sorry about it. All right, so all right, inside of the car. This is ugly, but it is just for first startup. Anyways, so arm harness comes through the bulkhead. There is a chassis conversion harness. I don't know if you can see it. It's such a clean install. The chassis harness comes from here, actually way over here, but anyways, it comes up here, goes over the top of this. It follows the factory harness, goes all the way over to the other side. So there's a Honda, I think it's like a 10-pin connector, and then a 2-wire connector. It goes over here, comes all the way over, and then I have basically wired everything in up until the ECU, whatever you want to call it. And this is a bag of snakes over here. This is pretty rough, but this is the ECU. It's kind of just stuffed up there for the time being. And the goal with this is to just get it started. God almighty, I just want to hear it crank over. So everything for the most part, except for these 3 wires right here, which is fairly easy. I don't need these to run it. I should say I don't need these to start it. This is a coolant temp wire that goes to the dash cluster that makes the dash on a EG work. It's just like the sweepy needle thing. And then this is, what is this? Charged light. And then this is fan switch. So none of this is really needed to crank it. And I'm going to wire this in later. But I just kind of want to get it to crank. And I'm not going to say it's going to run. I just want it to crank to make sure that nothing blows a fuse, the harness is wired correctly, everything's where it needs to go before I wire everything else in. So that's kind of where we're at. Dash is still out of the car, obviously. I do need to pull my throttle cable through just so I have that. Once I get the intake ported, I'll do the throttle cable next. And then, yeah, that's about it. I did pick up a Toyota Prius electric power steering column to get rid of this right here. So it's no longer like a manual rack. And I'm really debating how I'm going to handle that because I want to get it running and driving. This is probably a future project, but I did get the column. In order to do that, I think I'm going to go back and put the power rack back in the car, but depower it just because it has a quicker steering ratio. And there's also I guess an Integra rack that you can buy that is a quicker ratio than what the Power EG rack is, but I would buy an Integra power rack, put it in this car with a Prius electric power steering, and this should give it quite a good feel. I think it'll be more so what I'm looking for than just a manual rack with manual steering. So this is how the car is going to stay currently. I'm not too concerned about steering ratio right now because I'm not really doing anything with the car, but eventually that will be an upgrade that we do because we already bought some of the parts. Aside from that, I do have to, once I get the wiring and everything taken care of, I need to put the dash back in. Obviously, I do need to pull the shifter back out of it in order to put the carpet back in the car. And then when I do the carpet, I'm going to put the seats in the car. And then when I do the seats in the car, I will pretty much be done with the interior. I know that it looks like I have a long way to go so far, but we're actually getting pretty close to being able to at least crank it. Maybe not start it, but at least crank it. So I'm pretty excited about that. I did have a problem with my laptop hooking up to this ECM. It is a Link G4X, so I've got to figure that part out to make sure that it's able to connect, and we can start looking at a base map. The way the car is set up right now, it is all K24 TSX, right? So this is pretty much, aside from the 50-degree VTC, all the injectors are TSX. That's the reason why I changed the connectors, because I wanted it to be able to start up on a factory injector. This motor, with the modifications that I've done to it, will probably outrun a TSX injector at some point, probably right off the bat. So I could go to like an RDX injector, which is a little bit bigger. But the ultimate goal would be just to get it running and driving the way it is and not have to worry about hammering it. Like, I'm not going to go out and flog it the first time out. I just want to make sure that everything starts up, cranks up, works, idles, everything works the way it's supposed to. It doesn't overheat. Like, I just want to make sure it functions, and then I'll start modifying it from there. So I would think that this motor with bigger injectors should make like 230-ish with what I have done to it. And that should be plenty for the time being. I would assume, and I've told you guys that at some point in time, I was going to turbocharge this car. So we have purchased Pulsar Turbo, which is good and bad. I don't know. It depends on what you think. Like, it is not a precision turbo, right? I get that. But it is, for the money, a pretty decent deal. This is a 3582, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, take a minute. Dual ball bearing, nothing crazy. It really isn't like anything crazy, but it should be just fine for this car. I think that turbo will take me to 500, and then we will, that's probably way more than what I need for what I'm doing. I think it'll murder the clutch that's in the car currently, but that is the next step, right? So I'm planning ahead a little bit. Once I get everything started and running and functioning the way it should, then we'll start modifying it. But I want to make sure it starts up and runs stock pretty much for the most part of what it is. And then we'll start working on small stuff. And then we will start adding a little bit of horsepower to it. So this should be a good time. And not too thrilled about my fuel pressure regulator. It is a cheapy one that came with the K-tune rail. So this might get changed out eventually, but it is what it is, and it bolts on nice. So we'll see how it goes. Other than that, not much has changed. It's just in the garage and kind of waiting for, I don't know, waiting for a battery and a few more wires, and we should be able to hit the key on it. So I'm looking forward to it, and I guess we will see you in the next update. Appreciate you guys watching, and hopefully the next one's a good one.